Today is October 1st, 2010, and I am interviewing Richard Warner, and he is 62 years old. He was born on August 18th, 1948. My name is Kayla Warner, and I will be the interviewer. Could you state for the recording what war and branch of service you served in?
I served in the Vietnam War, and I was in the U.S. Army.
What was your rank?
I was a sergeant.
Where did you serve?
In Vietnam and Fort Hood, Texas.
How many years were you in service?
8 years.
So you served in the Vietnam War. Where were you living at the time?
In Lincoln, Indiana.
How did you happen to serve in this war?
I was drafted.
What were you doing before you were drafted or enlisted?
I worked at General Motors.
Did anyone else in your family serve in the military?
Yes. My brother Jack, who's a Marine Corps helicopter pilot in Vietnam, he got shot down 3 times and wounded, and he lives in Florida now. He was a captain in the Marine Corps.
Can you tell me about adapting to military life, physical regimen, barracks, food, social life?
Physical is pretty rough. It was hot, and it was really, they tried to break you down, which they did, and the food was absolutely horrible, and the barracks life was really just, you were good buddies with your bunk mate, top bunk or bottom, whichever one you were on, and then most of the guys in your building were your friends. You really got to know close.
How did you choose the branch of service you served in?
I was drafted into the Army.
What kind of training did you have?
I had infantry training and on light weapons, heavy weapons, infiltration, and jungle training.
Friendships formed?
Yes, I had a lot of friends I grew up around this area I was drafted with. I think there's some from Young America and Peru, and some from Indianapolis and stuff that I, were friends with.
Where did you serve?
I served in, I went to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, Fort Knox, and then to Fort Lewis, Washington, but I went to Vietnam right after Fort Lewis, and then I went to Fort Hood, Texas. Then the second time I was at Fort Knox, and went to Fort Carson, Colorado. I went to Germany and Italy, and I came back to the States at Fort Knox and got out of service.
Actions or duty away from the front line?
Away from the front line, basically when you were in Vietnam, you didn't have any duties other than, you went on R&R, or it's just like a little vacation to get you out of the jungle.
How did you stay in touch with those back home?
You called on the telephone. You usually wrote letters, but sometimes you could call if you were in a country where you could call from a telephone.
What did you do for recreation, off-duty activities?
In Vietnam, we shot pheasants and shot lizards off of decomposing bodies in the jungle and in the Mekong Delta where I was serving, and that was basically our recreation.
Were you still overseas when the war ended?
No.
Where were you?
I was back in Fort Carson, Colorado.
How did you return home?
I flew home.
Reception by the family or community?
Oh, the family was quiet, and the reception at the airport sucked, and the community was really kind of strained.
How hard was it to return to civilian life?
Civilian life?
Yeah.
Very hard. Very hard.
Are you a member on any veterans organization?
I belong to the American Legion, and that's just about it.
Any contact with fellow veterans?
Yes, I have friends in Pennsylvania I call, and one in New York I talk to once in a while, and the colonel I served with at Fort Carson, I call him once in a while and talk to him.
How has being in the military life affected your life?
I'm totally disabled because of it. It gives you new appreciation of life. It really makes you wonder about certain things, and it makes you thank God for every day you got.
Lessons learned?
Lessons learned? Don't start a war unless you plan on finishing it.
Is there anything else that you would like to share?
No, not really.
Any pictures?
I've got pictures, but I'll have to give them to you. It all depends on if they want to, show them in the class or whatever. I've got some pictures, yes. I don't know if the camera would pick them up, but I don't think it will. So, but I'll show you one. Here, I don't know if it'll pick it up. That's me. I was a lot thinner then. And this is me with Bob Moyer, a friend of mine from Humbolstown, Pennsylvania. I was a machine gunner and he was a machine gunner in Vietnam. And that's Gene Crum bending over in the background. And this is a village around where I served in Vietnam. That's from the helicopter when we were going into land. This is me and my friends just before we were getting ready to go out on ambush that night. That's usually woke up at noon and started cleaning your weapons and getting ready to go out on ambush and stuff. So that's when you were the most awake at night, because that's when you did your job at night. And so my whole life was consumed with darkness, I guess. That's the best time to go out, because you wouldn't get killed at night, not as easily as the daytime. You were kind of on equal footing with the enemy.
What type of place did you stay in and sleep in?
I slept in the jungle. I slept on rice paddy dikes. I slept in a hammock for one night. You'd sleep on the rice paddy dikes, which were a foot wide, and usually there were decomposing bodies around you. So when you woke up, you'd be staring at God knows what, just decomposing people. And the stench was horrible sometimes. You tried to get away from where the bodies were so you wouldn't have to lay around them and stuff. And then you'd get a drink of water, and you'd look upstream from where you got your water, and you'd see a couple bodies laying in the water. So it was kind of traumatic. You'd be drinking from the same creek or same water that the bodies were laying in. It was kind of a mental mess up, if you know what I mean.
Were you scared to go to sleep at night?
I'm scared to go to sleep now. It never changes. Once you've been there, your mind is never the same. If you were actually in combat and you hunted people at night like I had to, it's a psychological nightmare. Was
training hard?
No, training wasn't too hard. In the States, it was really pretty easy. A lot of it was done after dark. Night infiltration, survival, escape, and evasion. And weapons training was usually done in the daytime. The only time you'd have some nighttime practice, but most of your training was done in Vietnam, was done in the jungle and stuff. And you learned from your friends over there. If you didn't learn, you didn't live. and they tried to teach you the best they knew how to keep you alive, and you tried to learn as fast as you could so you could take care of them too. So it was kind of a, you know, it was a they help you and you help them situation.
How did you awake in the morning?
I am a pretty cheerful person in the morning, no matter where I'm at. Even in the jungle, I was happy because you didn't want to be depressed around those guys, and they didn't want to be depressed around you because you look at your surroundings and the death and the destruction and stuff, and you know, it was a psychological nightmare. And you tried to be cheerful as much as you could with them, and they tried to do the same thing, to keep your spirits high. And it was a pretty rough situation sometimes. I used to really get depressed sometimes, and I got to the point where I loved death, and then it was time for me to leave. I knew it was time for me to get out of war. So I had to reevaluate my mind and stuff, and so I used to carry the skull of a Vietnamese that I killed on my belt for about a month, and I just finally I said, this is not right. So I got away from it, and then I said, because I hated things so much, it was pathetic.
Did you ever wake up in the morning and salute the flag or anything, or say your Pledge of Allegiance?
No. Usually you woke up, if you were up all night, you usually woke up around 2 o'clock in the morning. And it was, like I say, you had to clean your machine gun and stuff and get your ammunition ready. I had 800 rounds of ammunition I had to clean every day on that. And, to get ready to go out at night, because you didn't want to have your gun not fire because your life depended on it. Everybody else's life depended on your machine gun to cover them. So, patriotic stuff like that. When you saw the flag, you knew what it was for. We had a flag, hanging over the perimeter and stuff, and it was, it meant a lot to you. But that's the reason you were there. If you didn't love your country, you wouldn't have went. That's the way it was.
How was the food?
The food was absolutely atrocious. It came in a can. The candy that came in there, called John Wayne bars, they were hard. They looked like a hockey puck. The Vietnamese kids wouldn't even eat them. You'd give it to them and they'd throw it at you. And the food you ate come in a little green can. You'd open it up and it was beanies and weenies, and it was put in there back in the 50s, and this was the 60s. And you ate that, and it had ham and eggs, which was green and stuff. It was pretty atrocious stuff, but you were just a lean, mean fight machine. I mean, I weighed 126 pounds when I was over there, and I was nothing but muscle. That machine gun weighed 27 pounds, and I carried over my body weight, which was 129 pounds. I carried over my body weight of equipment and the machine gun. So you were physically, you were just the best you'd ever be in physical condition. So, but in stateside, when I was stateside and served over here, I was a drill instructor and stuff, and I took care of platoons and the tanks and stuff like that. And you did have to go stand. You had to stand reveille in the morning and retreat in the afternoon. You'd have to stand it with the battalion, and you'd have like 1,000 guys standing there, saluting the flag and stuff, standing at attention every morning and every afternoon, unless they didn't let you do it. You'd usually do it once a week, and you'd all have to march down and do it. And then we had parades and stuff like that. And the second time I was in the Army, it got more pomp and circumstance, as they called it. It was more military than what the first time in Vietnam was. Over there, you were just over there to kill, and take care of business, and that's what we did. But when I came back to the States, and I went in a second time, it was more regular military. You took care of your vehicles, your tanks. You went down on tank gunnery, and I went to Germany, and I had a tank over there, and I was a narcotics agent over there and stuff, or off as NCO, and took care of stuff. And it was, it was an experience.
Were you busy?
A lot of times you were busy all day and all night, but sometimes you were, you had day off or 2 days off, and you got to enjoy, running around. But during the war, you were usually busy, 24/7. Well, you were on guard 24/7. You weren't busy. You were, just taking care of business. You were, you didn't know what anything was going to happen at any time. But when you came back to the States and you served in the military, it was entirely different. It was a lot better.
Did you do anything in your spare time?
Back in the States or in Vietnam, you usually we did things over there. Once in a while we'd throw knives and stuff, and just to keep our mind occupied and stuff. Chase monkeys, stuff like that, and sometimes we'd go and guard the dock. We'd guard him, or I'd go out with him outside the perimeter, and you'd have some woman that came in, have her leg blown off, and she had gangrene from shrapnel in it, and he'd have to go out there and perform an operation on her, like cut her leg off at the knee or something. You'd have to stand there and pull security and help him hold her while he did it. And it was just, your job. And you felt sorry for the civilians and stuff. And we had a little girl over there that had a piece of shrapnel 6 inches long in her face, and we couldn't get it out. He tried to take it out, but he couldn't, so we had to have her sent to the Philippines, and they took it out, and we called her Princess, and we saw her me and Bob and Jean did before they left, because I rode to the rear with them, and her face is healed up and she could talk to us, and it really made us feel good to know something happened out of it. But that's basically, in the stateside, it was, you'd play rugby and volleyball and stuff like that, just basically what the military does now for sports and recreation.
Did you learn any different languages?
Some Vietnamese. I tried to learn German, but I didn't like German language that well. But I learned some Vietnamese, like Nuc Dai and Buku Dinky Dao. And Buku Dinky Dao means you're crazy. And Nuc Dai is ice. And Buku Nuc is lots of rain. There's a lot of languages over there. A lot of words you pick up and stuff. Like Buku Sao means you're a big liar. And just a lot of little words you learned. And I had a Vietnamese interpreter that he went to college in Saigon, and he taught me a lot of words. When he was out with me working and stuff in the jungles, he'd always say, "What do you call this?" And I'd explain to him American what you call something or how you'd say it, and then he'd turn around Vietnamese and he says, "I'll tell you what it means in Vietnamese." So that's how I learned.
Did you get overjoyed when you get to talk to those back home?
It made you feel good, but every time I talked to him, I'd say over, because I was so used to talking on the radio. You'd always have to say over every time you got to with a word or a sentence, and you'd say, "How you doing, over?" And I kept catching myself on the telephone saying over every time, or stuff like that. It was really kind of awkward. My dad said, "Why do you always say that?" And I say, "Over." It was really strange, but it was kind of rough talking to people back home.
So when you got home, did you do what you normally used to do?
No. Well, I did. I went to work at General Motors and stuff, and I couldn't adapt to normal life, so I had to change my way of thinking and stuff, and it was pretty rough, and I suffered from PTSD as soon as I got back. It was really, really rough, mentally and physically. I lived in a building for a year, an abandoned building. It's really strange situation, but I quit General Motors and stuff and just walked away. I couldn't handle being around people.
Did you drink a whole bunch of water?
In the jungle, yeah, I drank a lot of water, a whole bunch of water. It all depended on what you were doing when you drank the water. Sometimes you couldn't find water that was that you'd want to drink, and you'd have to use purification tablets in it. And the Agent Orange and stuff like that down in the Delta where I worked, or where you pulled your ambushes and stuff, it was contaminated with Agent Orange, and you'd drink it and you wouldn't know that you think that it was good water, but in all reality it wasn't good water. It was poisoned, and I didn't know it at the time. So it gave me a lot of health concerns.
Did you have any pets?
Yeah, I had a dog in I had a little dog called Snoopy, and we had him at the perimeter. This Vietnamese gentleman saw him, and the next day I saw him, and he was eating him. He took my dog, so yeah, he took my dog and ate him, and that really made some of the guys mad because they really liked the dog. So, needless to say, the next day his house was no longer there.
Did any of the other veterans get a pet at all?
Yeah, we had one that had a pet monkey. And he got up the flagpole and took the flag. He was shaking the flagpole and stuff, and the lieutenant had him and said, "I'll give anybody $10 to get that monkey off that flagpole." And we had a guy named Galloway from Ohio. His dad ran a John Deere dealership, Jim Galloway, and he was redheaded and looked like Jingles on Wild Bill Hickok. And he walked out there, grabbed a 16 and shot that monkey right off flagpole. And he says, "I want my $10. You told me anybody got him down would have $10. He says, "I want my $10. So the lieutenant had to give him $10 because he did get his monkey down for him.
So how did your food get brought to you?
Sometimes they had cans called Mermite cans. They were long, and they kept the food hot. Sometimes you got it from the rear, the rear is what we call base camp, and they'd bring it out in trucks, and you'd get one hot meal a day supposedly. But they'd bring it out, be instant potatoes, watered down milk. It just tastes like white water, and it was horrible. And food, which was pathetic. I mean, a dog wouldn't eat it. And the coffee would be an oil slick on it. You'd have to brush it aside to get the coffee out. It was absolutely horrible. But usually you ate those little green cans in those little brown boxes. They were sea rations. And that's what you usually had for breakfast and supper. But lunch, usually they tried to give you a hot meal or supper. But what really wasn't worth eating. You'd eat it, and then you'd get, sometimes you get diarrhea, and you'd be on the facilities, the outdoor toilets for 2-3 weeks. Sometimes it'd take 2 weeks to get over it. It was horrible. Dysentery, basically.
Were you excited when you got to come back home?
Oh yeah, you always are happy to come back home when when you figure 24/7 somebody's trying to kill you. I mean, it makes you feel good to know that you got to come back home after you saw your friends and stuff in body bags. It'd make you a little happy when you got on the helicopter or got in the plane, but then you turn around, you'd be coming home and wonder why.
Thank you so much, Grandpa. Thank you for serving our country, Grandpa.
You're welcome, Kayla.